Welcome to the Partnership on AI's webinar to share with you the results of our AI labor and economy case studies. I am Lisa Dyer, the Director of Policy at the Partnership on AI, and I am pleased that 3 representatives from the AI labor and economy case studies research team were able to join us this morning. Michael, would you care to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks so much. My name is Michael Chewy. I'm a partner at the McKinsey Global Institute, which is McKinsey & Company's research arm. The reason I'm here, though, is because I've been honored to be the co-chair of the Partnership on AI's AI Labor and the Economy Working Group, and also one of the collaborators on this set of research on case studies. And so terrific to be here. Let me also allow our other collaborators who are on with us today to introduce themselves. Titi?
I'm Tati Chattopadhyay. I'm the Associate Director of Princeton University Center for Information Technology Policy, and my contribution to these case studies was on the Zymergen case. Lars?
Hi everyone, my name is Lars Jensen. I'm an economist with the United Nations Development Programme's Strategic Policy Unit in New York, and I was the co-lead on the Tata Steel case.
Terrific. And while the 3 of us will be representing some of this work today, we also want to acknowledge that there were other collaborators within our working group, and particularly Eleanor, who could not be here with us today, as well as Madeline Claire Ellish, who also is not able to join us, unfortunately, but we'll do our best to represent the great work of our collaborators as well.
Great. We're really excited to present to you today for 30 minutes a summary of our work. The first 15 minutes, we're going to talk about the actual case studies themselves, what we found, and what we see the impacts of the case studies and the future of work. For the last half of the webinar, we'll answer your questions, and we really appreciate those who have sent in questions ahead of time. We look forward to seeing what comes next from participants who can contribute questions live during this actual webinar. I thought it would be useful just to give you a quick overview of the Partnership on AI. We are a global nonprofit organization committed to creating and disseminating best practices in artificial intelligence. By gathering leading companies, civil society organizations, academic institutions, and people differently affected by artificial intelligence, PAI establishes some common ground among these entities which otherwise may not have reason to work together. By doing so, we serve as a uniting force for good in artificial intelligence. Today, we convene more than 90 partner organizations from around the world to realize the promise of artificial intelligence. And of course, you can always find more information about Partnership on AI at our website, partnershiponai.org. But today we're here to talk about AI, labor, and the economy, and this is one of our primary areas of research. I'm going to turn this over to Michael, who's going to serve as a moderator throughout this program.
Terrific. Thanks, Lisa. Why don't we start first about what we decided to do as a working group. First of all, I think one of our observations as we surveyed the landscape of research that's already existing on artificial intelligence is that there's been a lot that's been published already and a lot of research done looking at potentially the future of AI and its potential effects on the economy, potential effects on the workforce. But one of the things that we thought that we could contribute to the overall dialogue, contribute to the knowledge, is to understand what's really happening in the world already as artificial intelligence is deployed within organizations, and try to get to the real granularity of looking at real use cases, real examples where AI has already been deployed. And so what we tried to do was curate a set of different case studies of organizations that would allow us to actually understand what's really happening in the world. And so we try to create curate a variety of different cases. Again, there are not too many because we're trying to go for depth as opposed to breadth here. But let me just describe a few of the ones that we actually were able to study. And of course, our case studies we documented in great detail, and they're freely downloadable from the partnershiponai.org website. So feel free to anyone who's on here to go ahead and take a look at some of those details. But just to describe the 3 cases that we actually did study. The first one is Tata Steel. It's a company, and the site we actually examined was in Europe. And so again, this is a legacy industry, a large industrial sector of the economy that deployed AI in order to try to improve steel production at one of their plants. And so we tried to understand what the impact of that was, both in terms of the impact on that company, on that steel plant itself, as well as how it how the deployment of AI connected with the ways that workers operated within that site. The second example is Axis Bank. Again, in the financial services industry, a knowledge worker industry, you might describe it. But this one's based in India, a developing market. And so again, in this idea of trying to create a bit of a breadth of different cases. And in this case, they deployed AI in the form of a chatbot in order to do more customer service work. And so we have a number of findings from that case as well. And then the third case is Zymergen. Zymergen is a biotechnology startup. It's growing now, but it is a relatively young company, one that's very technology based, one that you might describe as AI native in the sense that it was born with the idea of deploying AI, obviously based in a developed market and also in a very highly scientific and engineering based industry. And so across this breadth, of different case studies, we try to get underneath the surface to understand what's really happening from an economic standpoint for each of these organizations, and also from a labor standpoint, how workers were involved, to what extent they were involved, and what impact that had on each of them. So what we want to do now, again, we have a tremendous amount of detail on each of these individual cases, but then, talk a little bit about the overall findings that we discovered as we looked across each of these. And of course, we understand these are our 3 case studies. We're hoping that we'll see more go over time, but this is our contribution. And so why don't we go through a few of those findings? Let's start with Tiddy.
Thank you, Michael. The first insight from these case studies was that the successful adoption of new AI systems required buy-in from management and the workforce alike. And if I could add, from external stakeholders as well. In doing so, having intelligible machine learning models was of paramount importance. The subject organizations worked with both internal and external stakeholders to ensure trust and buy-in. AI native Zymergen had more internal buy-in compared to the other 2 companies. At Tata Steel Europe and Axis Bank, teams needed to approach changes in culture and practice more proactively with relevant stakeholders. Not surprisingly, managing change within external stakeholders was more challenging for Zymergen and Axis Bank than for Tata Steel Europe. Zymergen needed to convince its customers of the value of its differentiated approach, and they did so by demonstrating financial impact and improved yield. Axis Bank required compliance with domestic regulations, as well as customer adoption of its chatbot. They used third-party testing to help with this. And in addition, Axis Bank also ran customer campaigns to drive adoption and to showcase the value of its AI chatbot. However, the most important element that affected the adoption of AI within these organizations was the explainability of the AI models and techniques. Unexplainable AI models made internal and external buy-in very difficult. Additionally, an incremental approach to trusting an AI system was another key strategy employed. Starting with simpler models earlier in the company's life cycle helped gain trust of the end users and the other stakeholders involved. It was more impactful to start with simpler models than to launch with more sophisticated models. I'm going to now turn it over to Michael for the next insight.
Thanks, Eddie. One of the other things that we tried to understand as we went through each of these case studies is what was the impact in terms of the investment and whether or not there was actual returns to those investments. In each of these case studies, we did in fact that productivity was increased for the individual firm and that they actually achieved a financial return on their investments in artificial intelligence. So take, for example, in the Tata Steel case, increase the productivity of the production of steel. In the Zymergen case, increase the productivity of the research and development work that they were doing vis-a-vis their clients and customers. And then also in the Axis Bank case, being able to service more customers, using the chatbot because they were continuing to grow their volumes in terms of the amount of volumes of customer service requests that they were achieving. but that we're receiving. But that said, the other thing that we noted, which is a bit of an echo of what we've found in other technology deployments, that it's very hard to say it was only AI itself, only AI alone that actually caused or was solely responsible for these increases in productivity, the return on the investments that they made. Indeed, what we found in each case was not only did these organizations deploy technologies, but they actually had to change the way they operated, that they had to couple management innovation with these technology innovations as well. And so, whether it was a steel company producing steel, whether it was a bank, doing customer service, or whether it was a biotech company, doing R&D, that company had to do R&D differently than had traditionally been done, by its customers. And so again, what we found is it's a combination of technology plus changes in practices and processes that actually results in productivity increases or ROI. And with that, let me turn it over to Lars for another finding.
Thank you, Michael. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the labor implications of our findings. And we found that there were varying impacts on the local labor force due to the adoption of these AI systems, but no reported layoffs to date. But these effects were also difficult to measure internally, and in some cases they cascaded beyond the firms we studied. So just to quickly go through the three cases, the interesting insights for the three cases. Only in the Axum case did we actually find a direct link between the application of AI and labor reductions. For the two other cases, there were indirect impacts, and these impacts are likely to be affected by issues such as demographics and the organization of the labor market. For Access, there was a direct impulse on the workforce reduction, mainly cascading outside of the bank through its outsourced customer service. For Cymergen, there's never really been a workforce to reduce because Cymergen is an AI native startup, but very interestingly, their core team is about 50% smaller than that of a conventional R&D lab. Tata in the Netherlands are facing a particular set of challenges pertaining to the labor market. And for them, AI and advanced analytics have not been applied with the primary purpose of reducing the labor, but rather to improve the quality of the raw material inputs and also the quality of the steel output. The steel industry in the Netherlands is highly unionized, unemployment is low, and the plant operators at Tata are reaching retirement age. And so there will be a lot of voluntary attrition for Tata Steel Europe. And of course, in the long run, they hope as their AA program matures, their advanced analytics program matures, that this will help them combat some of these issues. Back over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Lars. If we could actually just pause for a moment here, I just want to throw it open to other observations, from our research collaborators. Are there other things that you found in addition to these key findings that we've documented here?
Sure, Michael. This is Lars. Let me jump in. I think one of the most fascinating results about this work, in my opinion, is that we see how AI and advanced analytics is being applied across these very different companies in very different industries, but all with relatively high levels of success. One might expect that AI and advanced analytics will have a large impact in, say, financial services, as our Axis Bank case fits into, as financial services are already highly digital. But to also show that AI and advanced analytics is being applied successfully in a legacy and very physical, capital-heavy industries such as steelmaking was a real eye-opener to me. And if I was a bit skeptical about AI being a general-purpose technology prior to joining the work of this working group, I'm definitely less skeptical now. Over to you, Michael.
Super interesting. I think the other thing that I'd add, and you covered it a little bit in part of the key findings, is as we start to think about the impacts of these technologies, and particularly AI, sometimes we try to we looked at very specifically at these three organizations, but sometimes the actual impact of these technologies actually might be cascading elsewhere, right? And so thinking about the secondary and tertiary effects, as we found in the Axis Bank case, while there weren't relatively small numbers of changes in the employment of the bank itself, it was actually in their contractor where we actually saw a significant displacement from that account to, and those people were redeployed into other accounts. And so to try to understand in greater detail, there's more work to be done as we look at the secondary and tertiary effects, sometimes in related organizations, in terms of what AI could actually change from the labor workforce. Tiffany, anything from you? Tiffany, are you on mute?
Yeah. Michael, if I could add that in Zymergen's case, just to add to your point, while it didn't impact their own workforce, what you did see is the possibility of impact on their clients and the downstream work of their clients, and there was potential impact on that workforce. While the company itself didn't see impact being an AI native company, their clients probably would, because of the use of the technology. There was some sort of cascading effects on that sector.
Super interesting. Well, great. Thank you. And I'll remind our participants to go ahead and if you have any questions, to enter them into the Q&A.
Great, thank you, Michael. I wanted to just quickly touch on the implications of this work and what will happen next in the partnership on AI. We have received requests from partners and global policymakers for more information on this topic, whether they're trying to figure out how to regulate this area to make sure that people continue to have jobs in the future, or they're trying to understand, is there really an impact on jobs, and is there a net difference that actually results in increased employment? They're very eager to hear more about this information. Therefore, the Partnership on AI will continue its work in this effort. I wanted to turn it over to Rachel Din, who is the program lead on the AI labor and economy case studies for PAI, to hear more about what we will be doing in the immediate future on this topic. Rachel?
Thank you, Lisa. PAI is spinning up a couple of initiatives to follow on this important research area. We view the case studies as very foundational groundwork at really establishing what's happening on the ground and what are AI's real world impacts. But we are now conducting a series of research projects focused around worker well-being and around data workers that are actually involved in the AI supply chain. So our worker well-being project will look at the different dimensions of worker well-being that are impacted by AI, with the goal of establishing a shared framework for managers, workers, and other stakeholders to walk through a set of questions and really understand the technological impacts of AI on their workforce and organization. The second project around AI supply chain would be looking at all types of workers impacted by AI, including data workers that are actually involved in manually labeling the data that goes into building these models.
Great, thank you, Rachel. With that, we're going to turn to the question and answer session of our program. I wanted to first throw out a question. Tiffy, I wondered if you might be able to address this. We had a question that says, for developing countries, which AI-related skills should be developed, particularly on a broad scale? And the person who submitted the question said, is there anything that should be done in policy and education?
So my sort of insight on this is mostly, of course, the case that I worked here was not in a developing country, but the one insight I had here was there was a need to sort of train the workforce on quantitative skills. There was a lot of, there were more jobs for people, even within in high-tech sectors or low-tech sectors, people interacted with algorithms more, so there was a higher need for developing those quantitative skills. There was also a need for sort of looking into risk assessment procedures, both in the private sector as well as government sector, as they thought about implementing these technologies.
Great, thank you, Tiffy. Michael, Lars, do you have anything to add?
This is Lars. I think also an important point here is that in a lot of developing countries, the issue is that you're facing also a huge infrastructure gap in ICT. It might not be that the infrastructure is not there, but it might not be affordable and in that sense accessible due to missing types of regulation and policies. So that's an important point to add, I think.
Great. I wanted to take a question that was submitted via chat and throw it out to our three experts. What were some key obstacles to adoption of AI the team noted in the 3 different cases? Michael?
I'll start. Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that Tilly mentioned before was the front line, in order to adopt some of these technologies, needed to, in some ways, understand, what why it is the recommendations were being made. And so this idea of explainability, this idea, and in fact, we found in some of our cases that choices were made to use, slightly less complex models in order to have, the workers actually adopt the technology. And I think the other thing that we also found, particularly the Tata case, and Lars, feel free to jump in here as well, is that involving the workers in the deployment early on was part of the ways to overcome that obstacle of actually adoption and at the front line.
Great. Lars, Tithi?
And if I could add, implementation was often more effective if there was really close collaboration between developers, subject matter experts, and the AI system. And with time, the team sort of got more comfortable with unexplained models, but they had to start off with simpler models.
Great. Thanks so much. Lars, I thought you might be the perfect person to answer this question due to your expertise in inequality. How can we prevent significant negative repercussions on human dignity and inequality due to automation? Is the question that was posed.
Thank you. So yeah, I think we already touched, Michael and Titi already touched a bit upon this, and I'll speak to it from the Tata case where I was involved. What we found from that case study was that in order to secure workers' sense of dignity and self-esteem, it was key that the buy-in was very actively managed. And Michael rightfully mentioned that sometimes you had to reduce the complexity of models in order to make them explainable. For instance, at Tata, you face a situation where it was very challenging to convince very experienced plant operators to at times take decisions based on recommendations coming out of these AA models, instead of relying on their own intuition that they had built up as experts over many, many years. And the way they dealt with it at Tata was to make sure that the data engineers, they spent a lot of time involving the plant operators and translating the AI and AA models and their outputs so that they were more intuitive and understandable, and also by designing easy to use interfaces. And this was absolutely key to the success of this program at Tata, and to get buy-in from the plant operators, and also to make the plant operators understand how they were part of the technology, and for them to trust and react upon the machine recommendations. And this was, of course, again, key in order to be able to improve the AA and the AI and AA models in Tata. Thanks.
Great. Tithi, Michael, anything to add there?
No, I agree.
Okay, we'll turn to our next question. We previously touched on a key finding related to productivity, and Anna, via the question and answers section, asks, who is seeing the benefits of the stated productivity? Can you quantify or qualify across earnings and wages?
Yeah, it's a terrific question, and obviously there's been a lot of debate in the economics research about who actually benefits from these findings. I dare say in the cases that we've studied, they're quite early, and it's hard to actually make a direct connection between changes in the wages there and changes in the economics of those organizations. Our view into this was from the management perspective. In terms of and what we so I think we don't, it's inconclusive at this point. I think in interviewing management, they definitely said they needed to do this in order to compete, but it's very unclear at this point, at least from the data that we've collected. I love to the Laura said whether or not you have any other perspectives here, to be able to directly associate the deployment at this point, because it's so early, with corporate level changes in earnings, or necessarily any specific changes in wages of the workers that we looked at.
So I'm going to talk about the Zymergen case, but one thing to keep in mind with the Zymergen case is that it is an AI native company that works in the biotech sector. But in the short run, or at least during our case study, we did observe that there was a slight rise in sort of earnings, or we sort of saw the wages go up a little bit, but that was partly due to the fact that now you had more scientists and more researchers with quantitative skills and more computer or IT-based skills, and that could have led to the higher earnings in this sector.
Great. Lars, anything to add there?
No, I agree very much with what Michael said. It's extremely difficult, also at least from the Tata Steel case, to say anything about the impact on wages or the wage distribution across the different types of employees, and much more research is basically needed, is definitely needed in this area.
Okay. We're going to shift it to a question that we received ahead of time, and the question is, how can AI drive increased employment? Michael, would you like to take a chance at that answer?
Yeah, delighted to. Certainly what we see in some cases is an increased employment in those roles that are related to the technology development and deployment itself. Tithi can talk a little bit about some of the additional roles that were necessary in the case of Zymergen, for instance. AI-related roles, data-related roles, technology-related roles, and so we definitely see increases there. I think the other place where we see it, and this comes back to the thing that I mentioned before, which are the tertiary, secondary effects of these technologies. Certainly in economics, what we've seen before is if you increase productivity, that drives additional spending that can create jobs in other places. That said, in one of our cases, we did see significant displacement as a result of technology. It turns out it was with a subcontractor, and it turns out that those people were redeployed to other accounts. So by no means do we think that AI cannot result in some employment displacement. I think the question is, over time, what are the net effects? But it's interesting in our cases that we found some cases where we didn't see any labor displacement at all, at least within the subject organizations themselves.
Great. Tithi or Lars, anything you want to add to that?
So before I add this, I do want to sort of put a disclaimer there that I'm talking about the Zymergen case, which is a very unique sort of positive sort of case when it comes to the impact of AI on the workforce. They did sort of see that their core teams were smaller, and but even though their core teams were smaller, the increased productivity and increase in capacity because of that had saw faster life cycles of projects, which led to sort of them working on more projects. So the core team was smaller, but they worked on more projects, and there was a large shared services team that worked across these different projects as well. So you did see a larger number of people working on these projects.
Great, thank you. We have one more question, time for one more question, and it comes from our Q&A chat box window. Millie asks, in your research on these case studies, did you ever find that the AI faltered or made mistakes? Lars, in your work on Tata Steel, did that ever come up in the discussions?
It did come up in the discussions. Yeah, thank you. One of the ways that AI was being applied in Tata was to control something that's called overboiling, which is basically when you put all the raw materials in a big pot and you boil it and you melt all the iron ore and you add scrap metal. And they were trying to build a model so that was able to tell them when there was a high risk of this overboiling. And there was, of course, an amount of trial and error that went into fitting that model. And as it often is with these technologies, models, they improve over time as you input more and more data, and as the plant operators, they take the decisions when the model, they tell them to do it, and that decision goes back into the model and improves the precision of the model. So definitely, there's a lot of trial and error.
Great. Well, we're running out of time here. We have a little less than a minute left. I wanted to make sure to thank everyone who joined us today on the Partnership on AI's first webinar featuring the work of our partners on AI, labor, and the economy, and the case studies. I wanted to thank Michael, Tithi, and Lars for joining us here today on this webinar. For those of you who would like additional information about the case studies, they are available on our website under partnershiponai.org. They're called Compendium Synthesis under the Research tab. And of course, if you'd like to get in touch with our speakers or learn more about Partnership on AI, please feel free to email us at partnerships@partnershiponai.org. We will be sending out a link to the webinar, and we encourage you to share this link with your family, your friends, your colleagues. And again, thank you very much for your time this morning, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.